All right, we're back with Casually Hardcore's GM series. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we're right back in the mix. So Hanzo, go ahead and continue your statement. You were talking about a fellow that you had trusted with some HR decisions.
Right, right. And I was basically saying that, if you want to delegate that HR related stuff to people, it's important to make sure you know they're aligned. And, the story I was telling was basically of Vader. Was a fellow from my vanilla and TBC era who, I looked up to as a leader and who helped mentor me, and I felt that he just had a naturally good way with people. I mean, he was practical in that he wanted you to improve in raids and such, but he naturally just wanted to he felt compelled to be a part of mediation, and he knew and understood people and people-related issues, and he helped work a lot of that stuff out. So before you delegate to a similar type of person, make sure you know them inside out. Take them outside of WoW. Ask them about their opinions on things other than WoW and gaming. And the more you feel like they are aligned with you in a lot of those ways, opinions, the more I think that you can feel a level of trust and delegate those HR-related stuff. Absolutely. Guild leaders should not shoulder all of that themselves, especially as a very large guild. If you can have other people that you trust that mediate problems well, people-related issues, absolutely. By all means, put them in charge of helping with that.
Now, talk to us about some notable HR situations that you were able to successfully mediate, and talk to us about how those situations were squashed and why.
Some of my very first experiences with mediating issues came just from the gut, right? Only because I didn't really have professional experience with managing people issues, but I did want a good outcome, and I felt that. And I still feel this way with a lot of hardcore guilds. They cut people out without giving them due process, and it's because they don't have the time. We're here to hardcore raid and get some world first, server first. They don't have time for your petty drama. And I felt that I didn't really have that flexibility. I needed people, right? And if I had reasonable investment into them up to a point, I felt like I kind of need to put the rest of the energy into them, because it would be more costly to cut them to the curb and start from scratch with a brand new person I can't guarantee I would be able to replace. So a couple that came to mind initially, the early ones were, I had a person who was very, very socially awkward. He was picked on a lot because of his lisp, because he was not the greatest player. He was young, immature, had a lot of opinions. And I kind of worked very, very closely with him behind the scenes to say, here's how things should go when you're in this conversation with these people. These are the types of things that make these folks flare up. So you won't want to say certain things around these people, right? You'll want to make sure you carry this type of an air about you when you are in the vicinity of these folks here. It seems like I'm telling people how to behave, right? It seems like I'm telling people to change their personality or behavior, but look, that isn't it at all. These are recommendations or discretionary choices as to how to improve one's social awareness of themselves in these circles. The fact is, you can't change people. Really, at their core, you can't change them. They might be able to change themselves if they get to that part mentally. It doesn't happen a lot. People go to their grave in full denial that they've ever done anything wrong. So, yeah. So with that particular fellow, I did have some success. Perfect example. He'd like to talk a lot about Tattoo, which was that Russian group, the two girls that sang the song "All the Things She Said" or whatever. It was a very popular pop tune, during like the Burning Crusade area or whatever. And anybody that kind of expressed that they liked that artist was just shit on. I mean, it was just like a joke. Like, this is the worst music in the world right now. It's comparable. It's worse than Beaver, right? But he kind of like flaunted it, kind of like a Star Wars geek would flaunt their knowledge of Star Wars. And I kept telling him, look, you love Tattoo? Hey, I love Tattoo too. But we can't keep talking about that. You already have bad credibility in the progression raid, and this is adding to it. Let me suggest something different. You share that Tattoo stuff with me, behind closed doors when we're IMing each other out of WoW. And when you're in the guild, when you're in raids, why don't you focus more on when you fuck up, own it immediately. Say, you know what, guys, that was my bad. He had a little bit of an issue with dying in the fire and such. So I said, let's do that. Instead of talking about tattoo 24/7, let's focus on, God, you know what? That was me. I own that. I apologize. That's not going to happen again. That last death was me. That was on my shoulders, right? I got him thinking about, let's start taking accountability for your own shit. And these people that are giving you problems, that are coming down on you like Dallins and some of the other folks, they're going to ease up on that. When they see that you know you are fallible, that you make mistakes, they have that perception that you don't, that you're too good for yourself right now, right? This is another part of mediating people issues. People see things in each other that don't exist. And as a kind of a guild leader that is, or just a leader of any team, I think that that's an innate ability you need to have. And if you don't have it, I hope you can hit the books and learn how. To be able to see how, oh God, Marcus really totally sees this one person as a total D-bag, but it isn't. I'm here to tell you that I had genuinely good, honest people, kind, would never say an awful, mean thing to anyone in the world. And there were still folks that thought those guys were D-bags just because of one little simple incident. One little incident. I haven't brought it up in my blog yet, but for the blog readers that are also watching this podcast, my healing officer, a gal who went by the name Brigina, who just awesome gal and helped us tremendously through the Burning Crusade, and I feel is one of the core people in DoD, has the opinion that another person from the Wrath and Cataclysm era, Mangetsu, who's a lover of ponies and anime and says all kinds of funny things, and he's also a very good player, she thinks he's a little bit of a D-bag. And it was because of one incident wherein she tried to join a raid that he was helping manage. He didn't know who she was, didn't know her history, not that that mattered, and just wanted to see just a little bit better gear. Right, just wanted to see the gear be a little bit better, a little bit more enchanted, a little bit better gemmed, and she had just come back to the game. Do you see what I mean? As a guild leader and a leader in general, you need to be able to have that kind of perspective. I can step back here and tell you from afar that Brigina and Mang are both genuinely good people. And even though Brigina has a little bit of a strange, a slightly skewed opinion of Mang, it doesn't take away from either of them. It was one situation that happened that caused that opinion to be formed, right? Now think about how many hundreds of those types of interactions happen daily, weekly, monthly. When you're a guild leader for 8 years, yearly. Okay, there are a lot of those circumstances. So are you willing to? Do you have the time? Do you have the energy to schedule to be able to sit down and manage that? I hope so. Or maybe you're a hardcore guild that says, yeah, sorry, we don't have time to mediate, so you're out.
Now, in my old guild, I had a situation where I had a player who stepped into a raid as a replacement and right away really made a real bad first impression. Deep down, I knew this player. He was a Death Knight named Dumpstalove. It's real. Yeah. He turned out to be a real douchebag, as I felt, as I knew, and I knew this player was going to be a cancer. I could just feel it. But I didn't do anything about it. I mean, I confronted him.
You gotta go with your gut. You gotta go with your gut.
And you know what?
And this is the thing. I think guild leaders they just don't want to follow their gut, right? Like, but we really need the tank. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Take them aside and say, you know what, this just isn't working out. I'm sorry. We're not the guild. You're not a bad guy, but we're just not a fit for you. You belong, somewhere else.
And that's the thing that I was going to ask you, is going with your gut. And I didn't. There was a lot of situations where I never went with my gut. I said, no, he'll be fine next week or whatever. So the one piece of advice I can always give to a fellow guildmaster is the first impression of a player is always going to be a great indicator, especially if it's a strong first impression. Somebody may take their time to get out of their shell, but if they're out of their shell really quickly and it's not like oh, this was an awesome raid, thank you guys, that might be a shell. But if they're really negative early on, you should go with your gut.
Yeah.
Because I didn't and I failed.
Yeah. Yeah, I would sometimes even prep them. Okay, so this Friday is your first raid, so here's a couple of basic suggestions. Just going to throw them out there. You don't want to bring up religion. You don't want to bring up politics. You probably don't want to bring up anything that's, anything that's not WoW related, right? So if you're, for example, this might even, how do I even phrase this? So we had a couple times where we had people get recruited into the guild that were super nice, seemed legit, they're on the level, good players, good gear, they were online, ready to be invited at raid time, and I had them introduce themselves, and they say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I've been raiding for X amount of years, and I love pot! Okay, all right, well, that's great, I'm not going to shit on your love of marijuana, but we have a couple of cops in the guild, so you might want to, the guild leading and management stuff. It's awesome to talk about because you're gonna have people that are gonna say, yeah, you're right. You should kick the pot smokers out, and then you're gonna have another group of people that go, whoa, 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 what are you talking about? Freedom or whatever. What I'm trying to talk about is discretion, professional discretion. You're gonna walk into a brand new job stinking like marijuana, or if it's something that you deal with for a medical issue or you're addicted or whatever, but you're trying to make a change in life or whatever, are you gonna make an effort to just try to show up to work and not reek like marijuana? I'm not trying to change how you are in real life, but I'm trying to tell you what we expect. And it doesn't make it right or wrong. It just says this is what this group is looking for, and maybe you don't fit that group. Maybe you belong in Half Baked, this other guild behind us, right? Or Smoking Fools. That's a real guild name, by the way, on Deathwing. Smoking Fools. I'm sure they're great guys. I'm sure they are awesome. 24/7, probably baked out of their mind. Love them to death, and that's cool. If that's what their guild is about, and that was not what DoD was about. So again, transparency and communication, and just make sure they know what they're getting themselves into.
Now, to go on with the fan questions, I got a couple of them from Damien, and these questions are loaded, and they're for both of us. So
Sweet, loaded questions, my favorite.
All right, so what was the best and worst G-kick you've ever done? It's a two.
Oh, God, what a great question. Best G-kick was, I haven't told this story. I feel like it's a spoiler, but we're getting there. So the best G-kick was a fellow who was a player who I'll leave him nameless for now because the story will come out in the blog. But he was the type of player who it didn't matter what class you gave him, he sucked at all of them. Right? So if he was a paladin, he was the worst paladin. If he switched over to mage, he was the worst of the mages. If he decided to bring a shaman, he was the worst shaman. But the trick with him was he didn't think he was the worst. He thought he was pretty badass, actually. And he wasn't really looking for any criticism or suggestions on how to improve. And one day, I'd had enough. And at that point in Cataclysm, we'd had a new rank called Silenced, which I'd actually just changed from the label of Silenced to Janitor. And what that meant is there was a little bit of a punishment associated with the rank. If you got demoted to Silenced, you had to go to the guild vault and clean out all the shit, because people would like to just dump whatever they wanted into the guild vault, right? So now there was a price to pay. You're going to talk shit in guild, in raid chat, you're silenced, and you're going to go clean the guild vault out. So the day that he got that silencing, he said, he didn't say it, he yelled it, in vent, you know what, Hanzo? Fuck you and your guild vault. And he was instantly removed. So that was definitely the best kick. And a lot of people got a lot of raves, cheers, and vent just filled up with all kinds of applause and such, because they secretly all just wanted him to go. And I, being the way that I was, always tried to give people a little bit extra room for doubt. That was the easiest kick, and it felt very good. The hardest kick I have already blogged about. It was kicking a fellow by the name of Cursed, who was just an awesome, awesome guy who had been around since vanilla, and it was one of my core warriors. He was in the old Vale of Straws warrior rotation. I don't know if you're familiar with the fight, but in vanilla, you had to rotate warriors through a suicide pack, not a suicide, just a death pack. They had to kill themselves one at a time, right? And then a new warrior would step in place, and then they would die. And then a new warrior would step into place. He'd go for a few more seconds, he'd die. So Cursed was a part of that, and he was a part of all of our vanilla rating, and just a really great guy. I considered him a good friend. And after Ada left, I promoted him to officer without giving it really the thought and care that it needed, that decision needed. I put the wrong person in charge. And he was great. He was a great guy, but he was not right for officership. And the day that I demoted him was the day that he also chose to, and remember, I did not want him to leave, but he felt such, I think, such shame in losing that, and how I had dealt with it, which I got to admit, in retrospect, I didn't do it very well. I wrote him a Dear John letter, allegedly, right? It was intended on being like from a professional approach. I'm letting you know these are the diplomatic reasons why you need to step down. That was the intent, right? It really should have been delivered over vent, face to face. So he discussed it at how I handled the situation, and then just shamed for being demoted. He walked away, and I haven't spoken to him since. And it sucks, because I know that he's on Facebook. I see him there. I know he's on my IM list. I don't even know if he reads the blog, for all I know. But we haven't spoken since, and I feel absolutely horrible about that. And I'm here to say that that was the worst kick of all, because, it was, for the most part, me. I mean, I fucked that one up, not Cursed. I put the wrong person in charge, and I should have owned that. He should not have had to suffer that blow. So there you go. There's the best and the worst kicks.
Now, surprisingly, Hanzo, even though I was only a GM for 6 months, I only kicked 4 people, and I did it all within a 10-minute period. So
Wow.
I know, surprisingly, it's actually a very entertaining story. But in terms of the best G kick, I actually didn't G kick this person, but I put them in a situation where they just quit right in the middle of the conversation. That was kind of the goal.
Sometimes that has to be,
Yeah, and that's why it was kind of like the best. It was that guy Dumpstilov, and he started making racial remarks in Vent to a member of the guild who was from Kuwait, and this person is in the army, so you kind of know how he feels about people from that region, and. So I pull him in, and I'm actually going to blog about this one. I pull him aside, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And he basically kind of laughed it off and said, what, are we not allowed to have fun here? And I said, dude, you're not fit to be here. And then all of a sudden he gets off mumble, and he's like, sorry, I was having too much fun here, and he just G-quits.
Yeah.
The story, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I like to hear the story.
So what ended up happening was he was a member of our second raid team. So, and that second raid team was basically half of an old guild that I had absorbed. So they all ended up leaving, all in one fell swoop. But it was actually a very good thing for us, because we had been supporting the second raid team that was basically a fledgling guild, and to have them all gone, they were all kind of the group of, the clique of assholes is what we called them.
Yeah.
So that was actually the best move I made. The worst move I made was the only G kick I made. It had a lot to do with the 10 and 25 man divide. So what happened was my main tank, his name was Exion, good dude overall. He whispers me and goes, hey, I know you're having problems with the 2 healers that are a couple. They don't want to do 25s and anymore. They want to do 10s. He's like, I can't raid on these 2 days anymore, but I can raid on this day and this other day. Let me raid with them in the 10-man. Let me run a 10-man team, and let them be my problem. And I basically said, no, you're not going to do that. You're either going to be in the 25-man or you're not going to be in the guild. So they start rounding up people, and they pull players from my 25-man and run a 10-man, get themselves locked out the night before the raid.
I don't like the way this is going.
So I confront them, and I said, what are you guys doing? And they all kind of, the other two people that had gotten involved, they had been manipulated, so they were kind of spewing the same garbage that was coming out from the couple that had manipulated them. And they were just like, what's done is done. I said, okay, what's done is done. G-kick, 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 G-kick.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an ethical decision there. Same sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, but your interests are your own, not with the guild. I think that a lot of people lose track of that.
Yeah, and that was the only time I ever G-kicked anybody that wasn't, you know, an alt or a you know, the alt of someone who quit or someone that hadn't been playing in 3 months. That was the only time. And then 2 days later, the guild fell apart.
Yeah.
So that was all I had. So the next question that Damien asks is, what was your biggest recruitment error you ever made?
Oh, God! My biggest recruitment error that I'm willing to talk about. Jeez. So many wonderful errors. Well, I don't want to spoil the end of the blog, because people that are reading it right now don't know who the final bad guy is. The bad guy, quote-unquote bad guy. So let me see if I can pick one. Bad recruitment. I'd have to say, Jesus. Boy, that's a tough call.
Well,
I guess it depends on your point of view. I would think that one of the bad ones was, and this is probably more than likely due to inexperience, but it was a pair that I brought in, a husband and wife team that I brought in during Vanilla, who I won't mention by name, but they're already named on the blog, so if you're a reader, you'll find out, or you'll already know. And the gal was just super, super sharp, healer, great gal, really liked her a lot. The husband was an absolute, total D-bag. Could not get his shit together in terms of how we expect people to treat one another, what type of language, you know, is appropriate versus inappropriate. He could not get it together. And I, you know, turned a blind eye to that. And actually, the way the blog is written, one of my officers leaves as a result of it, and I think that that's very black and white because he left for many reasons, and I think that that one was just one of a small group. But that pair, that husband and wife pair, I had to get rid of them eventually. You know, and it sucked. It was also a very, very tough G-kick because I liked her and wanted her to stay, but I knew she was not going to stay without him. They were husband and wife. It was impractical to only have one but not the other. So they both had to go. You know, that sucked. That was a bad recruit right there. And the moral of that story, you don't just invite based off of one person. You interview both people. If it's a husband and wife team, fine. That's great. We'll take both of you. We'll be great. But don't take the gal's, you know, description of the guy, or vice versa. Interview them both individually. Make sure they stand alone on their own as decent human beings, if that's what your guild cares about. If you don't care about human decency, you just care about numbers, then make sure they both have good numbers, right? That was a bad recruit on my part.
Now, what was your biggest recruitment coup, so to speak? Like, what would be like the best recruitment decision you ever made?
Best recruitment decision I ever made. It's got to be Ader. Although I think that if it would probably be a tie, actually, because Ader was genuinely the person that mentored me, gave me such great advice on leadership, just not just in WoW, but outside of WoW. He really, and I hope that the second chapter of my blog speaks to that, that I began to take his advice outside of guild leadership and into just, this is the kind of stuff, this is how you behave in real life type of mentorship. That was significant. But I would have to say a close, very, very close second would be Blaine, which was the person he brought in to take care of the rogues, who again, and I hope the blog speaks to this well, I hope I'm writing it well enough that they get this. He came across initially as a very cold-hearted, black and white, dictator-like, I only care about numbers type of a person. You know, even when he and Ader worked together to lead the raids during Vanilla and TBC, Ader would typically be the personable one. He would deal with people issues, and Blaine didn't really have the time of day for that. Didn't really want to put up with it. He'd give you the tools to fix your shit, and if you didn't fix them, you know, it was no skin off his back, but he would tell it like it is. You're not being brought to raids because you were told to improve X and you're not improving. People didn't like to hear that. So I think early in the blog, and early in my career, I believe, as guild leader, he came across that way. Very black and white, didn't really have a lot of people skills, was very, very hyper-focused on raid organization and strategy, and he did that very well. But years later, he was still around and starting to really demonstrate that he did know people. He did have the capacity to deal with people-related issues, and he started to help quite significantly in that department. And maybe it wasn't his choice, but maybe he felt compelled because we were down to the wire near Cataclysm. But it was the initial read on him, which is he doesn't have people-related skills. He's just, you know, a pragmatic raider that cares about numbers. That wasn't true at all. He did know people. He did know people very well, actually.
Well, my answer to that question would be my best recruitment decision I ever made is actually two people. First one was a shaman named Baphomet, and he eventually took the reins of my old guild. Great guy. He professional at work, you know, very successful, knows how to deal with people. He was actually better at dealing with people than I was. I was more of a kind of motivational leader, while he was more of kind of like the almost like the fatherly figure, so to speak. And I also recruited another guy named Grey Cat who actually had no skills whatsoever in the game per se, but he had a knack for talking to people, and he quickly became my recruitment officer and he generated more raiders for me than I could have ever done by myself.
Nice.
So, yeah, and he loved it. That's what he loved to do. He would log in, do LFR, he would come to the guild meetings, he would talk to the officers. He loved to talk to people. So,
yeah.
Now coming from 2020 hindsight, obviously my biggest recruitment error would probably be the couple that I recruited, but it wasn't like I recruited them under any pretenses. They were just friends of a friend in the guild that asked for an invite, and I needed bodies. Yeah. So 2020 hindsight, for me, it would probably be those two. But I can't really merging with another guild 2 weeks after, that was a big mistake on my part. But so closing out the podcast, give us another sneak peek of what's coming up next in 8 Years in Azeroth this Thursday.
So the next post is going to be a little bit of a challenge to describe because it's one of those, shall we say, experimental posts. It tells the story of, so at this part of the blog, I'm considering cutting the 10s, right? Because I don't feel that they're going to stay aligned with the 25. They're going to undermine it. It's going to slowly degrade and chip away at the 25 until there's nothing left. And I'm of the opinion at that point in the blog that the 25 dies, so does the guild. So everything needs to be poured into it. And I have an emergency change of venue for my summer vacation, which puts a bunch of things into perspective for me and gives me pause. It makes me consider whether or not I'm about to make the right decision. And I think there's going to definitely be a few readers that are going to go, God, this is boring ass shit. What does this have to do with guild leadership or WoW? And you know, to those readers and to your viewers of the vlog, I'd say, I think that post, it's going to speak volumes, because I think there's a lot of baggage in our past, whether we're gamers or not. Everybody has baggage, and I think that paying attention to it helps explain why we are the way that we are. So, I don't know. People that don't get context, right? maybe might not understand the value of next week's blog. But for those of you who can empathize, well, it's going to be a very, very interesting blog post. Let me just say that.
And to plug mine, I've actually started one. It's not going to be as long as yours because I didn't have as much experience, but you can check out my blog so that way I can stop talking about myself during this stuff. It's
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Keep at it.
Yeah, I've actually posted chapter 4. It's called Humbling Hellscream. Not to spoil it, but it talks about the trials and tribulations that my guild had trying to tackle normal mode Garrosh early on as a guild. And chapter 5 will be dealing with, let me pull it up here because I can't remember my chapters. Is actually going to be, it's going to be called Drama Queens, and it's going to start kind of detailing the saga. Well, actually, it's called Setting Up the Dominoes. I kind of set up, not me personally, but it kind of talks about how drama starts in the guild, and it's only been 2 months old. So
Lovely.
you can catch Hanzo's blog at 8yearsinazeroth.blogspot.com. You can catch mine at godsamonglegends.blogspot.com. And next week we'll be taking viewer requests for topics because we've pretty much covered all the basic topics. But
Sure.
But we want to have a Q&A session with our fans for our next one. So send in your topics, and we'll discuss all of them. And you can even join in live on the chat room if you get in touch with me or Hanzo via Google+. So
Cool.
So thank you so much, Hanzo. It was great, man.
No problem. Now we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right. Take it easy.